It's Song Talk Radio.
Welcome to Song Talk Radio. This is a show with songwriters talking to other songwriters about the craft of songwriting. We share tips, tools, and techniques, and together we all become better at writing songs. I'm your host, Neil Modi, and with me, my co-host, Phil Emery. How you doing, Phil?
Checking in from St. John's, Newfoundland. I'm doing just fine.
Awesome. How's the weather out there on the East Coast?
Actually quite sunny and mild at the moment, but apparently there's a big storm coming tomorrow or Saturday.
Yep.
But I tend to not always believe them because sometimes it turns out to be much ado about nothing. So we'll find out, I guess.
True that. But if it's a storm that we just got here today, then yeah, it's coming your way. And it was pretty nasty here today.
Oh, was it? Okay.
It was hailing and rain and wet and mucky and all day long and windy as hell. Anyway, please send your comments, questions, weather reports to @SongTalk Radio on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Feedback @songtalk.ca for the email, and we'll share your thoughts on the show. And please visit songtalk.ca to see the show post for this episode, to find links to resources we mention, and to download lyric and chord sheets to follow along with the songs that we feature. And before we get to tonight's guest, just a couple of things. We shared something on our Song Talk Radio Facebook page. One of our previous guests and superstar singer-songwriter, Jacob Moon. If you heard him on the podcast, he's been with us a couple times, and he's an amazing singer-songwriter, and he also does live looping. And we actually did an episode with him where he was demonstrating and talking about how he does his live looping. And he's the kind of guy, I've seen him perform many times, and he's the kind of guy that his live looping isn't like a gimmick. It very much supports the song, and he's really classy about it. But in any case, he's doing live looping masterclass tour coming to a town near you at Long and McQuaid across looks like mostly southern Ontario, Belleville, Cobourg, Port Coquitlam. I don't know how to pronounce that. North York, in Toronto, London, Cambridge, Owen Sound, and Peterborough. And so if you're interested in live looping, definitely go to one of those Long and McQuaid's. Check our Facebook page. We'll put a link to the post in the show post for this episode. You can check that out. So
absolutely. And for our international listeners, Long McQuaid is Canada's largest music retailer, and they have stores, sometimes multiple stores. I think in Toronto they have three maybe,
yeah. Well, if you count Mississauga and Richmond Hill and Markham and everything, the surrounding areas, many.
But definitely they have stores pretty well all over Canada, including Newfoundland. So, and they've very smart because they offer really, really good financing to basically just about anyone. And I've been buying stuff on time there since I was 15. So I can't imagine if I ever saw my account, how much money I've dropped at that store.
I've burned a good amount of money there too, and they're always really customer service focused. And aren't they the biggest they're the biggest vendor retail retail lender in Canada or something like that? More than car dealerships, they finance so much equipment for all these in-depth musicians.
Yes, they're the second largest financing company in Canada, I believe. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, they also are distributors. They distribute Gibson and a bunch of other things, and
they have really good rentals as well. You can always go and rent equipment from Long McQuaid. It's a good deal, and it's a good way to try out stuff. And then if you buy the rental, then they'll knock whatever you spend or a portion of whatever you spent on the rental off the price of the purchasing it if you want to purchase it. So they're pretty good.
They're really good. It's yes, they've been around for a long time, so very trustworthy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And you got some other news you heard on the socials?
I just heard about, I think, David Crosby of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and sometimes Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Right.
Yeah, just passed away. I think he was 86, I think.
He was 86?
I think he was.
Wow.
I literally heard this about 15 minutes ago. So, it's a real drag. There's lots of people who are dying, and I wish, I think we've had enough of that.
It's gonna be more as the years go on, for sure. Jeez.
Yes, wow. Well, all the big stars from that time. 81. David Crosby dies at 81. Of course, he's been in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and, written multitude hit songs. And, one of the giants from Days Gone By.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, our condolences go out to his family and friends, and
yeah, for sure.
I guess time takes its toll on us all.
Yeah. So, like we were saying last week, get those songs done.
That's true. Have you been working on anything this week, Neil?
No.
No. Okay.
I've not had the chance this week. Although I was playing a little bit around before the show today, and for some reason my sustain pedal isn't working anymore. So there's that.
Well, you get to buy something new. What's wrong with that?
Well, I don't know if it's not working or just I don't know, software. It's just not working the way it should.
You tried turning it off and on again.
I tried unplugging it. I tried unplugging my controller, everything. I don't know. I tried there's a polarity switch on it. I've switched it this way and that way, and I have no idea what's wrong with it.
Oh dear, that's not good at all.
Yeah, I actually got this one for free because when two MIDI controllers ago that I bought, I had an old Roland pedal that I got with my Roland synthesizer back in like 1990 something, and like early 90s, and that sustain pedal kept me for like 20 something odd years, and didn't have a polarity switch, and then my new controller keyboard wasn't working, so I went back to Long and McQuaid. We were just talking about them, my keyboard from them. And I was like, this one doesn't work with this pedal's not working, or the keyboard. I thought there was something wrong with the keyboard because my pedal wasn't working with it. And they were like, no, you need one with the polarity switch. I'm like, what the heck is a polarity switch? Like, some sustain pedals have polarity switches. So they just like literally grabbed something from their rental department, like out of a bin. It was like, here, have this one. they just gave it to me for free because I already bought the keyboard. Just, okay, thanks.
They're not very expensive.
No, they're not. They're not. But you get those really cheapy ones. They're just like the flat square thing.
Yeah.
I prefer the pedal that actually looks like a proper.
Oh, I got one of those too, but it's So those are a bit more expensive.
A little bit more, but they're not. It's not the most expensive thing you will buy for your studio by any stretch.
That is true.
It's far from that. Okay. And tonight we're very happy to welcome singer-songwriter Jason Pilling. And here's a little taste of his song, Protect the Cubs.
We were like Romans at their peak, we controlled the whole block with our bicycle gang. Then the Cold War was over before I had my diploma. Every butterfly wing was putting money in our banks. So when I held you in my arms, I had the confidence to promise that everything would be
Jason Pilling is a singer-songwriter who draws lyrical content from a lifetime of being a regular nice guy with a math degree, and a nice little nuclear family, and 20 years of white-collar career experience. I celebrate the nuance of a normal life, Jason likes to say, by which he means he doesn't do love songs. Genre-wise, it's mostly folk, but Jason likes to tinker. What comes out reflects the tools on hand. His 2004 album Ambidextrous was guitar vocal driven because that's what he had. The 2019 album reflected the explosion of what one person could do with a guitar and a laptop. Since finally quitting his day job in 2020, sounds have been built, sampled, synthesized, and collaborated to release 3 EPs and 15 singles. Jason performs around Toronto and is in the middle of recording 2 more album projects in 2023. Welcome to Song Talk Radio, Jason Pilling.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show. And yeah, speaking of live performances, I met you at the Transact,
yes.
Which is the club where we historically have held our songwriters meetup as well, our Song Talk meetup in the other room, which is a great performance. And yeah, so you've been at this full time then for the last couple of years, then, yeah.
Yeah, it was sort of a coincidence. It was 100% coincidence that I I quit my job, and then lockdown started like literally the week later or something like that.
So it's your
I
fault.
did not plan to spend the first year of my post day job in this room, but that is basically what happened.
Wow.
I mean, it turned out to be a blessing. Everything is a blessing and a curse, right? It gave me time to really work on the craft.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with, being focused like that. And it's so easy to, do all those other little things that are around the house when you should be working on your songwriting, and being locked up can really help.
Yeah, that's never been a big problem for me. Like, it's the exact opposite. I get a little too obsessed with the things that are going on in this room, and the other things that are supposed to be done are getting pushed aside too much. I know there's like a joke when I was a student, it's just like you can never resist the urge to organize your sock drawer when you're studying.
Yeah.
But I don't have that problem when I'm working here.
Come to think of it, my socks are pretty well organized. Wonder what that means. There's a song there, I think.
That's true.
There's a song idea there. So okay, so before you quit your day job, then how long have you been tinkering around with songwriting then?
I think I was pretty serious and deep into it in sort of the latter half or the most of my university days. I have a musical family. My dad was a music teacher, and my brother was kind of like always like a few years ahead of me in this music activity. So I started like seriously writing my own songs in like late high school. And, before I was done university, I had a set that I could go out and play and stuff like that. And then I put a lot of effort into it until my daughter was born, which you don't understand how that's going to change your life until it happens, right? Yeah. So, but obviously it made a big change in how much time I could put into the song activity.
So how do you, well, it's an interesting situation you have, because many people that we talk to have day jobs, and they do songwriting on the weekends when they can. How do you organize your days? Do you treat it like a 9-to-5 job? Are you writing every day, or do you have a schedule, or how do you make it work?
Well, I don't draw any money from music, to be clear, so I'm no different than anybody else with a day job with respect to the financing of their music. My activity is financed from savings. But like in terms of like how do I structure it and stay focused and disciplined on it, I'm a night owl, so I frequently worked until 2 a.m., which I wanted to say before I say, my normal day starts at about 10:30.
Okay.
And I have like a mental warm up, and then usually, somewhere between noon and 1, I will kick into creative mode. And I always hit my stride in the middle of the afternoon, and I'm usually down here doing something related to the musical activity. It's not always making music, because sometimes it's about marketing, or because that's part of the game now. I make a lot of content. So I'm down here, I'm doing something that is focused on trying to advance my music career. And then usually I pull out of this room at about 6 o'clock and do family dinners type stuff. And I'm usually back down here by 8:30 and go until 2 a.m., at which point I need to shut off. Otherwise, I will not sleep.
Yeah. Because I'm sure if I did that, trying to go to sleep at that time after all that creative activity, your mind must be a buzz with like ideas and what you could have done differently. All those sorts of things.
I've learned that certain activities are better in the evening. Okay. I do a lot of editing.
Okay.
And more administrative type functions in the evening, I find. It's just kind of like a chill activity. I'll often like edit content videos in the evening. Like that's what I was doing last night. I was editing a video for 90 minutes until 2 a.m. It's just kind of a chill activity. Just sit back and do that. And eventually, yeah, you do have to stop. But sometimes you're just in the zone. I just keep on going. But I know I have to stop at a certain point. Otherwise, I'll just get completely screwed up on a schedule.
How do you deal with writer's block? If you ever sit down at 2:00 in the afternoon, feel like now's my time to do this, and like you set yourself up to write a song, but nothing's coming out.
To be honest, it hasn't been a problem at all.
Really?
Since I quit. For the few years before I quit the day job, I used to go for long walks and I would write lyrics on my lunch hour. And I would keep a notebook with me and I would be constantly tinkering and filling it. But I think it's also was just like I got better at writing songs as I kept on doing more of them. And I became more natural about it. And now I don't really worry about it. I have more songs than I can record now.
Oh.
So they seem to be flowing out of me at this stage. I'll have an idea and I'll just kind of like, usually I'll have an idea for like a verse or a chorus and I'll just kind of write that down and it just sits there. It's in Google Docs. And then eventually I'll come back around and sort of clean them up. Like for the project I'm working on right now, that's exactly how it went, is that I had all of these like vignette ideas and I would write even like a 1 minute song. And actually I made content out of all of them. Like that's how they first formed, is that I was just like, oh, this is a vignette idea. I'm going to do like this little song vignette. I make a little 1 minute video and I post it. And then in my mind at the time, it was like, oh, I'm done with these. I'll never come back to them. They're just like cute little ideas. But as I kept on doing that series of these vignettes, I realized there's something here. This is a thing that keeps on happening, and it has a charm to it. And so that's the project I'm recording right now, and I call it Post Nursery Rhymes.
Oh.
Because it's all of these kind of like little adult situations that you want to react to, which is kind of like, there's social commentary and making jokes.
Are they still those little 1 minute vignettes, or are they?
No, they all
developed into larger songs.
They all grew up.
Okay.
I think one of the songs is still only 2 minutes in its final length, but the rest of them are like 3 and 4 minutes.
Songs. Was that ever neat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I came back and just edited lyrics, wrote second verses.
So it sounds like you're a lyrics first person. Is that generally 100%. True?
I've tried writing songs the other way, and I think I've done it a few times, but I'm always I always know what the lyrics are going to be when I sit down with whatever instrument I'm working on. I might not have all the lyrics formed, but I know something about what the lyrics are going to be before I write anything on an instrument.
Usually you come up with a title first?
I'd say no. I mean, sometimes the title might be obvious, but sometimes I'll do like quirky titles that I think it's the thing that I would say is most central that I have to come up with first is what's the point? I think the nature of my lyrics are, I always am really driving at something. I have something to say. It may not be particularly profound, but it's clear in my head what is the point of this song. So that's the most important thing to me. And then titling is kind of an interesting question because, I mean, to me, titling is bait from a marketing point of view. If I titled my song, The Pumpkin That Rode a Bicycle or something like that, you'd at least be like, what is this song about a pumpkin that rides a bicycle? And, I wouldn't like totally clickbait it, but sometimes I do that with titles. I just I want it to be something that will grab your attention.
That's an important thing these days. It's an important thing to do. If you are wanting to get your material out into the market, you have to be conscious of how people perceive. And your stuff might be the most amazing stuff in the world, but if people don't have this little hook to make them go, hey, what is that? Then you're just going to be ignored along with 10,000 other songs that can't come out literally every day now that everyone has a recording studio in their laptop.
Yeah. I mean, the first things people are going to see is they're going to see a title, they're going to see a cover.
Artwork and whatever.
Yeah, I take both of those seriously in terms of what are they conveying. Mm-hmm. I guess the cover is really no limit. There's no limit on the title. Be as creative as you want, but the cover is an interesting problem because you could hire an amazing artist if you have unlimited budget for every cover. I don't. Sometimes I make my own cover. Sometimes I hire someone.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about "Protect the Cubs" then, which is an interesting title in and of itself. But what was the big idea behind this one? What was the point?
So that one was actually unique, in that it's triggered by a really specific event, which is an old friend from high school posted on Facebook that he was attending his first environmental protest on behalf of his kids, he said. And I just immediately grabbed on to what that meant emotionally to feel like society was veering off in the wrong directions. And the Protect the Cubs idea is like, it's not my kid's fault for sure. It may not be my fault either, but I'm the adult in this situation, so I have to do something. And it was a pretty emotional thing because, I mean, he's my friend and we're both geeks. And I completely understood why this was a big event in his life to go out to a protest, because I've personally never been to a protest. It would just like explode my sort of introvert brain and also my like everything's complex brain.
Yeah.
And I understood why it was so momentous for him. And so that's what the song was germinated with. And that's actually why there's two versions of the song on the EP. So I released the one that I wrote like in 90 minutes after seeing that Facebook post. So the vignette is on the CD or on the release. And then the one that I sent you is the final version. So, you're asking about, how does it change? That's exactly how it changes. There's like a 100-second version of it with kind of like some jokey lyrics.
Okay.
It's called the no pants version because the joke was that, he had to put on his pants because this was during pandemic. He had to put on his pants because he was going to a protest.
Yeah. I know you better wear pants. So is that the case? These are the. I mean, I know they're like your kids, all your songs, right? So we can't really take favorites. But are the developed songs objectively better than the vignettes?
Sure, in the sense that they're meant more for, I think, repeat listening. I think the vignettes are just, they're supposed to be fun. They're supposed to be attention grabbing. They're not, it's like pop art sort of. And I think when I form them, they may not always move that far from pop art because there's nothing wrong with pop art, but sometimes they get more serious. And in this case, that is definitely what happened, is that the first one had a few jokes and the final version does not have any jokes. No. It's dead serious.
It's not the funny
At least
song.
in my mind, it's dead serious.
Yeah. Okay. So then is it you putting yourself in your friend's shoes and sort of, or are you? It sounds almost like you're almost taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture around this experience your friend had.
Well, it just resonated with me. Like he was going to an environmental protest, and some of the lyrics I talked, like the second verse is about my own experience with being an environmental person. And I was always trying to push more. Like, for example, when I used to be at work, I used to carry a fork in my back pocket when I went out for lunch. I had a metal fork because I didn't want to use a plastic fork when I got to some fast food. I thought that was one little thing I can do. I can carry this metal fork and I won't create another piece of plastic garbage. Mm-hmm. And I used to carry around a little water bottle for the exact same reason. So I would never create this waste that I could avoid creating. Mm-hmm. So like that's kind of what inspired the second verse there, was that, I was making all of this effort, and it's always, when you're that person that's making that effort, it was always very frustrating to see, I walk into a meeting room at work and there's a lineup of 10 disposable water bottles there. And just like, why do we need this? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what the second verse is about. It's like, you're trying so hard to make a difference and you feel like no one else cares.
Yeah.
So I understood that part of it. And, I feel that way about politics as well. Like I'm politically engaged. I try not to be partisan, but that's different than being engaged, right? And my daughter is as well. And we talk about politics all the time. And so that was also resonating with me, is like the politics of the situation, and just, the relationship with my daughter related to those kind of problems is all what came out in that song. And it all just sort of triggered with the idea, with what my friend said. I think that the trigger wasn't that I didn't have the feelings before, but when you see someone else doing the exact same thing, you realize that what you had was a common experience. And now you think, now it's a song idea. Before it was just an idiosyncratic Jason thing. Now it's something that we could talk about together.
Okay. That's a really interesting way to look at it, because I feel like as soon as you get that commonality, you can focus the attention and really make a story out of it at that point.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it is kind of a ephemeral sort of idea stuff, but not really, like, what is it really about, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I'm not going to say like I'm neurodiverse or anything, but I'm definitely on various spectrums out there in the wilderness, super geek and stuff like that. So it's been a commonality of my life that I always wonder if the way I interpret events is normal. So when I see that other person interpreting things the same way, I lock onto that and say, okay, I was actually getting that one right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can relate to that for sure.
All right.
Okay.
Well, should we take a listen?
Yeah, let's take a listen to the full song, Protect the Cubs by Jason Pilling.
We were like Romans at their peak. We controlled the whole block with our bicycle gang. Then the Cold War was over before I had my diploma. Every butterfly wing was putting money in our banks. So when I held you in my arms, I had the confidence to promise that everything would be alright. Didn't think much of it then, but now I'm worried that I can't deliver without a fight. Now I perform the garbage sorting, dancing through choices, informed according to the curtain falls. I take a bow, I'm lying to myself, We've been waiting your whole life, but the EP that's been upheld. Back when I held you in my arms, I made a promise that everything would be alright. I didn't think much of it then, but now I'm worried that I can't deliver without a fight. So I'm going out to protest now. The truth is out more ways than one. It's the only thing I know for sure, and I'm trying to get it back for you. If there's no forest left, you can't protect the cubs. Back when I held you in my arms, I made a promise that everything would be alright. I didn't think much of it then, but now I'm worried that I can't deliver without a fight.
Thank you.
We talked a bit about the lyrics already, but the other thing I really love about this song is how the guitar part is so very specific, and it totally holds the pulse of this song with being melodic at the same time, and it's just a great guitar part.
Oh, thank you.
I'm a drummer at heart. That's my first instrument, and I'm like, most of the songs I hear that are guitar and vocal, I'm like, I'd love to play drums on this. Like, it needs it. The guitar is the rhythm instrument here as much as this whole melody as well. It's a great thing.
Yeah, that was actually part of the design of the EP. That was partly inspired by listening to J.J. Cale, if that rings a bell for you. But he was a very rhythmic, groove-oriented guitar player who had interesting lyrics. And I kind of said to myself, I want to make an EP which is fundamentally what you get when you come see me live. Mm-hmm. But so then I had to think about, how can I make songs that will stand on their own with almost no accompaniment? Now, you heard that there was a Rhodes on there. Mm-hmm. And so the whole EP, except for the vignette version that got released, but the 4 main body songs, same instrumentation, but they all have that same rhythmic guitar style. I recorded them all very much the exact same way. I was very deliberate about that. I set up mics like to the inch in the exact same position so that it would feel like a continuous performance.
This is all recorded in your home studio.
All recorded right here. That's what this room is all about.
Right on.
It's amazing what you can do.
It can be done, kids. Yeah, because the guitar tone is the other thing. The guitar tone is like really, really spot on. It's very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and what's nice about the arrangement is that full, but it's not just the guitar, but there's, the Rhodes is a very gentle addition, but it supports it without overpowering it. It's really nice. It just shows you don't need a lot sometimes to get something down that's emotional.
Yeah, I think that was also a good constraint that I put on myself, because I noticed, previous to where I came up with the idea for this project, I noticed that I was putting so much effort into making the guitar parts interesting that other things were suffering. And I decided on this project, like, the guitar parts aren't going to be boring, but their job is just going to be to hold the rhythm and define the chord. And that way I had to put the rest all in the vocals. And it was just a good constraint that I put on myself, because I noticed that I was writing, I think, better melodies because I couldn't lean on the guitar for that.
Ah,
That's very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's that whole idea. This has come up on the show a number of times recently, and in my own writing, it's come up quite a bit, is this whole idea of simplicity versus complexity, right? If you throw in too much stuff at the wall, then the listener doesn't know what to focus on, or it's a whole multitude of stuff, which is fine. It's a thing, and that is an approach you can take. But especially if you want your lyric to pull out, and then the lyric is very important to you, which clearly in this case it is, then yeah, you want that guitar part to kind of take a bit of a backseat. It's not, you're right, it's not boring. And we have the benefit, and our listeners will have the benefit. You look at the show post, we always post the lyric sheet up on the website for our listeners to follow along. And it's the same thing when we do our songwriters meetup, is that we always ask, and most people do, provide the lyrics. And it's a very different experience listening to a song, say on Spotify in the background, or on the radio or whatever, versus listening to it while you're reading the lyric sheet.
Yeah.
And some people even at the meetup are like, I don't want the lyrics. I just want to listen to the song on its own, on its face value, and that's perfectly valid too. But I think it's important to recognize that when you got the lyrics in front of you and you're following along, you experience the song in a completely different way. At least I do.
Yeah, I do as well. And when I'm a listener, I'm very lyric focused as well. I mean, to me, that's 100% what I listen to. Like my favorites are like Gord Downie, Amy Mann, Laura Veers, like all of these great lyric writers is basically what I stuff in my ears all the time.
And are you always, these lyrics are fairly, I mean, you explained what the song is about and where it came from and everything, but on face value, you kind of get that idea, but it's a little bit poetic, Romans and Cold War, and it almost sounds political at the top, because it sounds almost like a protest song is where you're going, which in some ways it kind of is, but then when you get into the chorus is a lot more personal, right? Which is very nice. But I guess my question is, are you, like you mentioned Gord Downie, like are all your lyrics in that more abstract, poetic kind of way? Or do you ever say it plain?
Well, I think that, I've studied Gord Downie quite a bit. And yeah, he has like the great metaphors, like, drop a caribou and, the Willie Nelson, which I'm not sure if that immediately connects for you, but they didn't actually, they were both good examples where I had no idea what they meant when I first heard those metaphors, but still they just sounded cool, right? Because there were interesting words to throw into a song. Like, I don't know why they're even there. And then eventually the meaning years later would become clear to me. And I thought that is just the perfect result. So I will try to do stuff like that. But the other thing, I mean, there was a good example in that song of a lyric that I left hanging. It was about the when I don't have it in front of me, dancing through
choices
ages,
informed.
Yeah, according to.
Yes,
informed according to, or according to. But I didn't say who.
Yeah, or what? Yeah.
And that's a Gord Downie trick. He's constantly leaving things hanging like that. And so, yeah, I'll do stuff like that now, whereas I think in my earlier songwriting, I would be like, I need to define who it was according to, because otherwise I haven't completed the thought.
Right.
And so I've become much more free flowing about that type of stuff, where I want the song to be coherent to me, but I'm much more open to the idea that you could get something completely different out of it, and that is 100% cool.
Yeah, and that's really the advantage of those kinds of lyric, where you leave things hanging, or metaphors that could be interpreted a number of different ways, and that makes a thing too. I'll admit that, like, I'm kind of the opposite of you. I'm very much music focused. I don't really listen to lyrics as such, or at least try to decipher their meaning upon first listen, maybe on later listens of a song I really like. But in my own writing, I tend to focus on lyrics a lot more lately, which is kind of a weird thing. And I'm in that same headspace that you used to be in. I think that I want things to be coherent and complete thoughts and make it comprehensible, at least for some of my songs.
Yeah,
it's an interesting line.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
It's an interesting line between being specific and being restrictive. So you want lyrics that are specific enough to emote an emotion, but you don't want to be something that's so specific that it sort of that it isolates and alienates the listener. And sometimes with protest songs, especially because they are protesting, people can be just so on the nose, and it can limit the impact, I think, because it just, like, no one wants to be preached at, even if it's about love, even if it's about anything. Nobody wants to be preached at because, we all think that we're right, and only I am. So that makes it a bit more complicated for most people. But, and I think, Blair Packham has talked about this, about being specific, about saying, instead of saying, like, I walked into the bars, I walked into that seedy bar, or I walked into that bar on Dundas Street, or, being that kind of specific. But you also want it to be open enough that other people can read themselves into it. And I think that's how people get more depth and more related to a work of art, as opposed to someone just sort of yelling at them, or just, so that's my thought anyways.
Yeah, I think sometimes now, which I didn't always do, I think it's maybe a trick that I've gotten better at, is that I'll think of, I'll maybe write something that's very specific. Okay, this is what I'm trying to say. And then I'll sit back and I'll try to think of what is some kind of situation that is kind of like that. And like the line about the Romans was maybe one of those examples. So we were like Romans. So that's the way the song starts. Well, what do people think of when they think of a Roman? And I mean, I sort of finished it afterward, but I was, in my mind, people were going to have some kind of reaction to the Roman metaphor. Like, to me, it was supposed to mean that you walk the earth with impunity. Like, that's kind of what the following lines imply from context, right?
Yeah, or hubris.
But that was an example where I thought about that, and I stuffed the Roman metaphor in there because I thought it was an example of something that was sort of would have an understanding across a wide group of people what it sort of meant emotionally to be a Roman and walk the earth. But whether or not it connected, I don't know. And even if it didn't connected, I somehow switched from Roman to something else, and that would probably sound cool. It would be like me and the, drop a caribou. I don't know what it meant, but that sounded cool. At least that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, it's a very strong opening, actually. We were like Romans at their peak. Like, that definitely conjures an image.
Yeah. And the choruses have a nice lift, which is important. And sometimes this kind of approach, the chorus cannot be too different from the verse. It's not stylistically too different. It's not like suddenly you're, changing the rhythm. It still fell within the rest of the song, but there was enough of a melodic and energy lift that the chorus worked as a chorus. You knew what the chorus was, you knew what the verse was. And I think that's an important thing for any kind of song. It helps people sort of follow along. And it's a simple song. There's no bridge or...
Yeah, no bridge or anything. But the melody in the chorus is much more expansive than in the verse, and you hit higher money notes, and it's very much more sing-songy. Perfect rhymes in the chorus. It all works together to really set that section apart, and really good. And and you've got like 3 repeats of the chorus with different lyrics at the end, which is kind of fun. And we were talking about titles before. Like, a title doesn't really come up until like almost the end.
Yeah. well, to me, that was the predominant emotion
Yeah.
of the song. And also, it suited the cover idea that I had.
It's interesting because I would have, listening to this, because I was just listening to it as I was doing some work, and I thought it would be Deliver Without a Fight, which I think is a really interesting bunch of words. Like Deliver Without a Fight, there's lots of action. Whereas Protect the Cubs, it's at the end. But it's titling a song is an interesting idea. I mean, I've always said when you perform a song, people are going to call it whatever they're going to call it. Like you can call it something, but people are going to sort of say, "Oh, play that song. What's the Deliver Without a Fight song?" And then you'll know what the title should be, because people will call it whatever they're going to call it.
Well,
it's.
I guess I haven't had that experience yet, but to me, this is a song about parenting, or it's a song about being a parent, and that became very important to me. Sort of like I was talking earlier about how I slowed down my musical activity when my daughter was born. And that was one of the big impetuses to get back into songwriting, is that I realized that there was no music that was speaking to me. Because, I'm a parent now, I'm this person that works in an office now, and nobody is describing that experience back to me in song. So I actually became sort of obsessed with like looking around for songs from a parent's point of view, and they are hard to find. So when I wrote that song, I knew it had to somehow reflect that it was a parenting song. And so that to me is what Protect the Cubs is signaling.
Right.
Yeah. But at the same time, I like I was saying before, like it feels like that's where you started, and that was the impetus for the song, and it was the title of the song. And it is very central to it, but at the same time, you kind of taken a step outward from that, and it seems a little more big picture to me than necessarily about parenting, because you really expanded the scope to climate change and all the rest of that stuff.
Yeah, but it's the answer to the question, why do we care?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question about, people aren't really writing songs about most people's everyday lives. I mean, like I love Tom Waits, but most of us aren't living in a CD bar in the middle of Texas, on a 3:00 on a Saturday morning. But there's many people who talk about the day-to-day grind, of going to work. And although I always thought that song, "What If God Was One of Us?"
Yeah, I think that is a good example of an everyday life.
Yeah,
but
just someone on a bus,
I would categorize that into a certain life phase, though. And so I noticed that there's a lot of people who are really good at that coming of age part of life, because that's where a lot of artists live.
Yeah.
And
that's where a lot of the audience lives.
It's where a lot of the audience lives too. So I agree, they're speaking to their audience. But if you think of like successful artists, that's also kind of in some sense where they stopped living, because they did that coming of age phase, and then they were successful, and they were no longer challenged as human beings because they had money pouring in, and they just had to keep doing what they're doing. So emotionally, I think I'm not trying to accuse anyone of anything, but I think some artists get stuck at that stage emotionally. And you'll see other artists, Caroline Brooks is a good example, I think, of she's part of the Good Lovelies, and you listen to her solo album, and it's the stuff that I love. Like, she's a struggling parent in some sense, and it comes out. But I think that it is actually legitimately part of her life. That's why it comes out.
Yeah. But I think you're right. That whole middle class, middle age, middle everything. Like songs tend to be about the extremities of growing up, or maybe not, getting that much older, but it's those sorts of contents, or falling in love for the first time, or breaking up for the 50th time.
One of my friends was telling me about the new Blink 182 song is about the struggles of being back in high school. Like these guys are 50 years old.
And when did they write that? They were probably like in their 30s, 40s.
No, it's their new song.
It's their new song. Okay.
She just wrote it.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's fine in the sense that they have an audience and everybody's happy. They're happy. Their audience is happy, and that's great. I'm not a fan of that stuff. That's not what I listen for. Gord Downie is a songwriter that grew up. If you listen to his lyrics, he's grown up with. You can grow up with Tragically Hip catalog. Like if you were the right age, it has always been the right age for you.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. It's to find a niche like that. People are, not writing about a certain phase of life or a certain approach, and focus on that. It's a great way of actually standing out from, yet another love song or whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's hard to
protest song.
It's hard to find an audience, though.
yeah, for sure. And then they say there's like Phil was just saying, like a niche. There is a niche audience for this kind of thing because there are people like you that are living through those experiences in the world. Whether they're looking for new music, that's maybe another question.
Are they looking for
or
new
whether
music?
maybe they're all loving the Blink 182 stuff because it harkens back to fonder, better times, right?
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm trying to follow the Rick Rubin rule that you got to make the art you want to make.
Yeah,
otherwise it'll suck.
yeah. You got to follow your path and do what you do and do it well, which clearly you're doing. So yeah, kudos to you. That's a great approach and a great philosophy.
Yeah.
Right. And like you say, you're not bereft of ideas. Like you're constantly finding the nuggets to pull out, right? Great.
So you can work on your next album and call it "Don't Make Me Stop This Car."
Yeah, maybe.
I'll turn this car around.
Whatever you do, don't make me stop this car.
Yeah.
What happens when self-driving cars happen? Do they still get into fights about that?
That's true. I don't know.
I guess even with self-driving cars, the kids will still be like, "Are we there yet?" Self-driving car will be like, "No."
The parents would go, "I don't know. I have no idea."
The car's driving itself. I have no idea.
Yeah, I suppose there's an awkward phase where you're old enough to ask that question, but you're not old enough to have a phone and see where you are on GPS.
Yeah, exactly. Just look it up on GPS. Yeah. It'll tell you precisely when you're going to get there. Oh, I love GPS.
So, Jason, what do you do to educate yourself on the songwriting process itself? Is it just by listening to other people or playing other people's songs? Or
I think I've gotten a lot out of doing like covers. I haven't done them much lately, to be honest, but I've always enjoyed that process of digging into a cover and learning how to play it. And seeing, especially for chords and stuff like that. Like you mentioned Tom Waits before. Tragically Hip had never been like my huge inspiration musically. They've been my inspiration lyrically, but I've covered Tom Waits songs because he's got really interesting chord progressions. And Amy Mann also has really interesting chord progressions. And so I try to play those songs because I want to see how they do it. And then, yeah, it's just studying lyrics and really trying to understand why they're good, I guess. And I think you learn in layers, right? So every time I would try to understand a song, I might pick up a different idea that, even though I've heard that song 100 times.
Are you collaborating at all, or is it mostly just on your own?
I'm trying to do as much collaboration as possible now, in part because I think it's really good for getting better. And two, it's really good from a career development point of view. I think, you develop deep connections with people through that process. So, like it was mentioned earlier that I'm working on 2 albums this year, which I think is a little ridiculous, but that's what I'm doing.
Sure.
And I have a producer on each one that I've hired to basically pick apart my songs and give me an honest answer at things. And they're very different musicians themselves. And with their very different approaches. So it's been really interesting that one of them focuses on this type of stuff and one of them focuses on that type of stuff. But I've even cross-pollinated them now. And it was just sort of, I mean, maybe it's not coincidence that these two people actually knew each other, although I didn't really know that. I don't think they've talked about me, but, I mentioned one to the other. Oh, yeah, that's my friend.
It's a small world. It's a very small world.
It is.
Wouldn't want to paint it, though.
Yeah, Canadian indie world, I don't think is that big.
Yeah.
Well, you would definitely look forward to hearing your albums when they're released, both of them. Very cool. All right, I think that's about all the time we have on Song Talk Radio. Special thanks to Jason Pilling. So where can our listeners hear more of your music? You got a website, right?
Yeah, I have the website is really just kind of trying to be an introduction of who I am. But yeah, listening platforms. I'm on all of the streamers, and I don't discourage people from using Spotify and Apple and stuff like that. I mean, people should listen where they want to listen. So yeah, basically wherever you listen, you can find me by my real name, Jason Pilling. It's a reasonably rare name. If you type me into Google, you'll get me.
That's true. And we'll definitely put links to your website and stuff like that on the show post for this episode on songtalk.ca. And we want to hear from you, our listeners, so please send your comments, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Songtalk Radio, or send us an email, feedback at songtalk.ca. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel for live performance videos and full episodes. Subscribe today to the Songtalk Radio podcast on your favorite podcast provider. And you can find links to all the products, books, and web services we mentioned on the show on our resources page on the website. And wherever you are in the world, please join us online via Zoom at our next monthly Song Talk meetup. It's free to join on meetup.com and free to attend the meetup, bring a song and a lyric sheet, and get constructive feedback from other songwriters. Stop by songtalk.ca for the link. You can follow me at neilmodi.com. You can follow Phil.
PhilEmery.ca.
And Jason, what's your favorite social media platform? What's your go-to?
I'm most active on Instagram.
Instagram? Everyone's an Instagrammer. All musicians are Instagrammers.
I know.
That's where we are. We got to collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. And be sure to stop by the website, songtalk.ca, to browse past shows and find out how you can be a guest. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and keep on writing.
Good night.
Yeah, no, I think you guys were asking good questions. My wife's a journalist, and and she does podcasts as well. She records podcasts, and sometimes she's a guest on podcasts.
Okay.
What journalist?
Angela Misri. She was actually the one who started podcasting at CBC Radio.
Really?
Oh, wow.
So yeah, she was instrumental in setting up like the Ideas podcast and some of the other big ones.
Ideas, such a good show.
Yeah, it was. Well, I mean, it's the right age, right? When we were graduating from our master's degrees, we came out into the world, and podcasts were like the thing within a year and a half of that. So it was just, and she was tech savvy enough to be in the right place at the right time. She became the podcasting person for CBC.
It's amazing.
Good thing to be.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. So anyways, I was talking to her about, the fact that you guys were a team. And she says, yeah, that's frequently a good way to do it, blah, blah, blah. We were talking about the dynamics of having a team interview a single person and stuff like that. It was just,
right.
But you guys do a good job. You're a good tag team.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. There used to be three of us.
Oh, okay.
For a long time, it was three of us. It's just been the two of us for a few months now, Phil?
Yeah.
Well, several months now, but yeah.
When we had we did a live radio show, we had a crew of 6. So
yeah.
Oh yeah, I was looking on your website and I saw that you had a crew, and I didn't understand the universe of what you're producing.
Yeah,
Or maybe
because we had 3 hosts. We had a social media person, we had an audio person, so like 5 people.
5 people, yeah.
Sometimes 6 if someone was in training for replacing somebody.
But that was in the before times, and then COVID hit, and we started doing it virtually. And it turns out it works out better because we have people from all over the world, and because anyone can show up. Whereas before they had to be in Toronto on a Tuesday night at 7. And it was just, really limited who could be on the show.
Oh yeah, that would drive people nuts being Toronto centric.
Oh yeah.
That was something that my wife would frequently bring up at CBC. It was like, we got to make this not about Toronto.
Yes, true.
Yeah, which is always a struggle at the CBC and many other places too.
Yeah.
Exactly. So Toronto centric, but yeah, it's very true. But
I'm sorry.
I mean, the other thing, the other side of the coin is that we also used to have lots more live performance on that when we did it live.
Yeah.
In the studio, because someone would come in with guitar, with piano. Sometimes we had like a 5-person band in that tiny little room.
Yeah.
And it was great fun. But on the Zoom, it's hard to do live performance, number one, and I mean, people are not.
It's not necessarily going to translate the same way. Yeah, kind of. When you said record or live, and I was like, I hope we can just do the recording because it's going to work so much better.
Oh yeah.
You have no idea, like self-engineering yourself on Zoom for a performance is just like, that's not a good performance.
No.
Yeah.
Not very easy.
Definitely. All right.
Totally cool.